Um, Hello, my Savagine. My Savagine. This is the second part of the book. Well, there should be more. Hold on, until this nigga shut up. Right. Be quiet. Alright, I'm back. Okay, I had to do a little disturbance. We're reading chapters 7 through 12. Okay. Just as full of comments. I think everyone's a little confused. I'm gonna put some pictures on the pictures of the characters. We're all a little confused, okay? So Mr. Krupp is the big fat nigga with the suit and tie. He the principal. And I think George is the black dude and Harold is the white boy. I'm gonna put pictures. There should be pictures up there. TJ gonna put pictures up there to get a little insight. Okay, so let's get into it. And y'all have to read the part 1 to understand context. And yes, I am dyslexic, so y'all gonna have to deal with that. Okay, this is a reading video. God. Chapter 7. Busted. Crash. Whoop. Went the door to the study hall room. Mr. Krupp stomped in like a crazy person. And George and Harold had never seen him this upset before. You boys are in so much trouble, Mr. Krupp shouted. I'm putting you two on a permanent detention for the rest of the school year. Wait a second, cried George. You can't prove anything. Yeah, said Harold. We've been here all day. Mr. Krupp smiled devilishly and looked towards the door. Oh, Melvin, he called. Like his little play door, his little doll thing. Melvin sneakily stepped in the room covered in mustard and eggshells spread throughout a coconut. Shredded coconut. They did it, said Melvin. Motherfucking snitch. Yep. Melvin get his ass whooped. Pointing at George and Harold. I saw him last night in the gym. Melvin, cried George. You promised. I changed my mind, said Melvin, grinning smugly. Have fun at detention. Chapter 8. The Invention Convention Detention. After school, Mr. Krupp ushered George and Harold to the detention room and wrote a long sentence on the chalkboard. From now on, growled Mr. Krupp, you boys will spend 2 hours a day after school copying this sentence over and over. I want every chalkboard in this room completely filled. On his way out the door, Mr. Krupp turned and said with an evil grin, and if either of you leave this room, you will get... For any reason, y'all will leave this room, I'm going to suspend you both. Shit. That was itchy as hell. Shit, that was itchy. Alright. Now you add my... Let me slow down. Now, as you might have guessed, writing sentences are nothing new to George and Harold. These boys have waited until Mr. Krupp left the room. Then they took each 4 homemade wooden rods in their backpacks. The rods had holes in them to stick chalks. The chalks in them that George and Harold had drilled into George's dad's workshop. He screwed the rods together while George and Harold inserted a piece of chalk into each certain hole. Then they each took a pole and began copying Mr. Krupp's sentences. Every time they wrote the sentence, the wooden holes made it 12. After about 3.5 minutes, every chalkboard in the room was completely filled. George and Harold sat down admiring their work. We got a lot of time on our hands now, said George. You got any ideas? Let's make a comic book, said Harold. So the two boys took out some paper and pens, created an all-new adventure about their favorite superhero. It was called Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. AKA, that's the title of the book we're reading. Okay, chapter 9 is just the it's just the comic book about the thing which technically it is spoiling, so we're going to skip this chapter. I'm sorry. Because technically it is, I do want to read chapter 9, but it's technically just spoiling the rest of the book along the way, so there'll be no point reading it. So you're going to sit and read this book. So we're going to, hold up. So we're going to go ahead and skip to chapter 10. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. Give me a minute. We skipped chapter 9, going to chapter 10. Chapter 10, A Big Mistake. George and Harold sat together in the detention room reading through the newest comic books and beaming proudly. "We got to go to the office and make copies of this," said George, "so we can sell them on the playground tomorrow." "We can't," said Harold. "Don't you remember what Mr. Krupp said? He'd suspend us if he caught us leaving this room." "Then we won't let us catch us," said George. George and Harold sneaked out the room quietly and crawled down the hall to the office. "Uh-oh," said Harold. "There's a bunch of teachers in there. We'll never get through the copy machine." Said George. "Are there any of the copy machines in the school?" "How about the one Melvin had in the gym?" asked Harold. "Oh, yeah," said George. George and Harold crept over to the new gym and found the Patsy 2000. "I wonder if this machine still makes copies," said Harold. "Melvin did say that he had to make some adjustments to it." "Oh, and he probably just crammed that mouse in there just to fool us," said George. "It's the oldest trick in the book. I'm sure the machine can still make regular copies." George placed the cover over the new comic book face down over the glass screen and pressed start. All at once, the lights in the whole school dimmed. The Patsy 2000 began to shake and clunk around wildly. The giant bolts of static electricity zapped out the bottom of the machine as it whirled as a great whirlwind rose from the top. The loose papers and other small objects in the room were stuck in the whirlwind, and they spun above the machine like a raging cyclone. "I don't think it's supposed to do this," shouted George. Over the horrible noise, finally, after a series of flashes and loud zaps and the noise, the winds, the sparks, all stopped together. The only sound that could be heard was something groaning and crawling out inside, bloated and flattered frame of the Patsy 2000. "It sounds like something was alive inside there, George." George snatched the comic book from the top of the machine. "Let's get out of here," he cried. And just then, a small ding was heard, and a full-size shiny white toilet emerged from the side of the Patsy 2000. Its teeth were razor-sharp and jagged, and its angry eyeballs glowed with red. "Smelling veins, yum, yum, eat 'em up," cried the evil toilet. Almost immediately, another talking toilet emerged, followed by another and another and another. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up," they cried. "Oh no," Melvin was right. The atomic samagablating yecto fantriplutonic zipper photomizer. That's it, right? Yecto fantriplutonic Zanzip photomizer really does create a living, breathing, three-dimensional copy of one-dimensional images. I'm about to have a stroke reading that word. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm gonna put it on. Well, I keep saying him. I keep saying I. It's supposed to TJ. TJ's gonna put the word on the screen. Hopefully. Harold cried conveniently. "I got an idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run," cried George. Chapter 11, The Convention Detention Suspension. George and Harold screamed and ran through the gym door, closing it tightly. "Aha!" yelled Mr. Krupp, who was coming down the hall as "You boys left the detention room, so you know what that means." "It wasn't our fault," cried Harold. Too bad. Mr. Krupp shouted lightly. You boys are officially suspended. Nigga, for suspension. Wait, cried George. You've got to listen behind. This door is an army of vicious talking. I don't have to listen to you boys ever again, laughed Mr. Krupp. Now you boys get your stuff and get out of the school. But, Harold stammering, you don't understand. Get out! Said Krupp screamed. George and Harold groaned and walked to their locker to collect their stuff. Gosh, said Harold. And one day we've gotten a detention and suspension and we created an army of evil talking toilets who want to take over the world. That's a pretty bad day, even on our standards, said George. Oh well, said Harold. I hope things just don't get worse. Chapter 12. Things get worse. A word spread quickly throughout the office and George and Harold have been suspended. Teachers rushed and cheered and laughed at the two boys. You are a big trouble now, said Mr. Anthrope. Like Deep Throat. What the hell is his last name? Miss Anthrope? Freaking Deep Throat. Just change that name. I can't wait to call your parents and tell them about the news. Let's take their desks outside and chop them up, cried Mrs. Ribble. Mrs. Ribble look ugly as hell. Matter of fact, all these characters look ugly as hell. Bitch looking like Tina from Bob's Burgers in this bitch. Or throw a party in the new gym, shouted Mr. Meaner. No, cried George. No, cried George. Whatever you do not open the door to the new gym. We can do whatever we like. Meaner as he dashed over the gymnasium door. Look, I'm opening the door. He quickly opened the gym door and closing the door, he said. Now I'm opening the gym door again. And now I'm... An evil toilet had struck its mouth, opened the door, and snapped Mr. Meaner up and swallowed him whole. Flush. The talking toilets then pushed their way through the gymnasium doors and spilled all out into the hallway. Yum, yum, eat 'em up. The teachers couldn't believe their eyes. Excuse me. They screamed and ran for their lives. Only Mr. Krupp and Mr. Ribble and George and Harold remained frozen in fear. They watched in paralysis as the talking toilets came nearer and nearer, and finally Mr. Ribble pointed at the toilet and snapped her fingers. I just did that. Go away, she cried. Go away this minute. But the toilets did not listen. They moved even closer and closer. Finally, Mrs. Ribble turned around and Mr. Krupp. However, he just stood there in a daze. George and Harold looked him up. Uh-oh, said Harold. Did she just snap her fingers? Yep, said George. And now we're really in trouble. And George and Harold was right. For that moment, Mr. Krupp had begun to change. A silly, heroic smile came over his face. As he stood definite before his foes, I'll put him to stop while you vile villains, he said fearlessly. But first I need some supplies. Mr. Krupp turned and dashed into his office. George and Harold ran after him. Why did Mr. Ribble have to snap her fingers? Cried Harold. Why? Never mind that, cried George. Mr. Krupp is turning us to Captain Underpants. We got to pour water over his head before it's too late. That is chapter 12. We will read chapter 13 through 18 another day. And this book is very good. TJ should put pictures of characters so we don't get confused. So y'all don't get confused who's who in the story. And yeah, if y'all really enjoyed this part, I didn't make any errors like the first video, so don't even gotta comment that. Anyways, I love y'all savages, savagines. Peace out.